Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be looking at Stoicism.
Okay.
But we're not just going to be looking at the theory. We're going to be looking at how we can actually apply it to better our lives.
I like it.
And we have this video that breaks down how Stoicism has been used by some pretty powerful people throughout history to kind of like become their best selves.
Well, and it's interesting. I think that, Stoicism is having a little bit of a resurgence in recent years.
It really is.
And I think that people are finding that a lot of these ancient ideas are shockingly relevant.
Absolutely.
To the challenges that we're all facing today.
One thing that really stood out to me from the video is this idea of acting as if, acting like the best version of yourself, even if you don't feel like it at first, and how that can actually almost be like a shortcut to becoming that person.
It's interesting you say that because that reminds me a lot of the Stoic practice of negative visualization, which Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, famously practiced, where he would imagine losing everything he held dear, his power, his family, his possessions, as a way to appreciate what he had and also to prepare himself mentally for any eventuality.
That's really interesting. I'd never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
It's not just about positive thinking.
Right.
It's also about like confronting those darker possibilities and developing resilience.
Exactly. And the Stoics believed that by mentally preparing for setbacks, you could actually reduce their power over you when they inevitably arose.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's like a mental workout for dealing with those like challenging situations.
Absolutely.
But isn't there a risk that acting as if could be perceived as fake or inauthentic?
That's a great question. And that's something that the video addresses directly.
Okay.
So the idea is that you're not pretending to be someone that you're not, but you're embodying the qualities that you want to develop.
Okay.
Things like courage, wisdom, justice, even when you might not feel them fully within yourself at that point.
So it's about aligning your actions with your values, even if your feelings haven't quite caught up yet.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, and the video uses the example of like walking into a job interview.
Yeah.
Imagine walking in feeling really nervous and unsure of yourself.
Sure.
Versus walking in feeling confident and self-assured.
Okay.
Even if you don't land that specific job, the very act of embodying that confidence can have a ripple effect.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
On future opportunities.
I can totally relate to that. I mean, there have been times when I've had to give presentations.
Right.
And like I felt terrified, but I tried to project confidence. And it actually did help me feel more in control.
Absolutely, because the Stoics understood that our minds are incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And that we can actually change our feelings by changing our actions.
So it's not just about waiting for inspiration to strike or to feel it.
Yeah.
It's about taking the action and then the inspiration, the feeling follows.
That's the core idea. And it connects with this other key principle in Stoicism of focusing on what we can control.
Right.
So we can't always control the outcome of a job interview or any situation, really. But we can control our mindset and our actions.
Okay, so even if things don't go our way, we still have the power to choose how we respond.
Exactly. And that's where true freedom lies, in choosing our response to whatever life throws our way.
The video also talks about seeing challenges as opportunities for growth.
Yes.
It's kind of like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right.
But with like a more philosophical twist.
Well, the Stoics probably wouldn't have phrased it in exactly those terms, but the sentiment is spot on.
Okay.
They saw obstacles as chances to develop virtue.
Okay.
So, for example, imagine you're facing a difficult problem at work. Instead of seeing it as a setback, you could view it as an opportunity to practice problem-solving, resourcefulness, resilience.
It's like turning an obstacle into a training exercise for virtue.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, reframing it from a threat to a challenge.
Yeah.
Something you can actually learn and grow from.
That's great. Yeah, that's such a powerful way to look at it. And it actually reminds me of something else that the video touched on.
Okay.
This whole idea of raising your standards. Yeah. Not in a competitive sense, but in terms of like striving for your own personal best.
Yes. The Stoics were all about setting a high bar for themselves, not to impress others, but to live in alignment with their values.
Okay.
So it's about constantly asking yourself, what would the best version of me do in this situation?
It's almost like having like a mental model of your ideal self.
Right.
That you can use to kind of like guide your actions.
That's a great way to put it. And what's fascinating is that the Stoics believed that by consistently acting in accordance with our highest ideals, we actually become more like those ideals over time.
So it's not just about wishful thinking. It's about actually shaping your character.
Exactly.
Through your choices.
It's about closing that gap between who we are and who we aspire to be.
But that raises an interesting question for me. How do we deal with those inevitable moments when we fall short of our own standards? We all make mistakes. We all have moments of weakness,
Right.
How would a Stoic approach failure?
Well, they certainly wouldn't dwell on it or beat themselves up about it.
Okay.
The Stoics understood that failure is just part of the human experience.
Yeah.
In fact, they saw it as an opportunity for growth.
That's a really different way of looking at it.
It is.
So it's not about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it.
Right. And the video gives us a great example.
Okay.
Epictetus, a famous Stoic philosopher, actually encouraged his students to embrace failure. He believed that by confronting our mistakes head on, we develop resilience and we become better equipped to handle future challenges.
So it's not about pretending that failures don't happen.
Yeah.
It's about using them as stepping stones.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Recognizing that setbacks are an inevitable part of the journey.
Okay.
And that it's really our response to those setbacks that defines us.
And it all ties back to that, that core Stoic belief of focusing on what we can control.
Absolutely.
We can't always control the outcome of our efforts, but we can control how we react to those outcomes.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful realization because it gives us agency even in the face of adversity.
Yeah. So instead of getting caught up in self-blame or frustration, we can choose to approach failure with curiosity and a willingness to learn.
Exactly. And the more we practice this, the more resilient we become. We develop a thicker skin.
Sure.
And a more adaptable mindset.
Yeah. It's almost like building a mental muscle. The more we exercise it, the stronger it gets.
Yeah.
And the video made this really interesting point about how this acting as if mindset over time actually starts to change our beliefs.
Right. It's not just about faking it till you make it.
Yeah.
It's about creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because if you consistently act with confidence, you start to perceive yourself as a confident person.
Exactly.
If you consistently act with courage, you start to see yourself as courageous.
And that shift in self-perception then influences your future actions.
Right.
And creates this positive upward spiral.
So it's like our brains are constantly rewiring themselves based on our experiences and our choices.
And that's why the Stoics place such a high value on practice and consistency.
Yeah.
They understood that virtue wasn't something you were born with, but something you cultivated through deliberate action.
So it's not about reaching some endpoint of perfection, but about embracing this ongoing process of growth.
Exactly. And the beauty of this approach is that it's accessible to everyone. You don't need any special skills or talents to start living a more Stoic life.
It's simply a matter of making that conscious choice to align your actions with your values and to view challenges as opportunities for growth.
And to remember that you have the power to choose your response to any situation.
The video gives like a really practical tip for applying this in everyday life.
Okay.
They suggest asking yourself, what would the best version of me do in this situation?
It's such a simple question.
Yeah.
But it can be so powerful because it forces you to step outside of your immediate emotional reactions.
Sure.
And consider the situation from a higher perspective.
It's like having a mental coach on your shoulder.
Exactly.
Guiding you towards your best self.
And the more you ask yourself that question, the more aligned your actions will become with your values.
So it's about making that choice moment by moment to act in a way that reflects the person you aspire to be.
Yeah, it's like that quote about excellence not being an act, but a habit.
Right.
By consistently making those small choices, we gradually transform ourselves.
That's the essence of Stoicism.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not about some grand sweeping transformation.
Right.
It's about those daily incremental improvements.
And the video makes this really compelling point about how this ties into our brain's incredible ability to adapt.
Yeah.
It's like we can actually rewire our thinking patterns by consistently acting in new ways.
It's called neuroplasticity.
It's a fascinating area of neuroscience. But essentially, our brains are constantly changing and adapting based on our experiences. So by repeatedly engaging in behaviors that reflect, our desired qualities, whether it's courage, discipline, or kindness, we're actually strengthening those neural pathways.
So it's not just about willpower or forcing ourselves to do things we don't want to do.
Right.
It's about understanding how our brains work and using that knowledge to our advantage.
Exactly. And the Stoics were way ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And recognizing this, they understood that virtue wasn't something you were born with.
Okay.
but something that you cultivated through practice and habit.
So like building a mental muscle.
It is.
The more we use it, the stronger it becomes.
Yeah.
And the video suggests that this process can actually lead to a shift in our self-perception.
Right. If we consistently act with confidence, we start to see ourselves as confident people. When we act with kindness, we start to see ourselves as kind people.
It's like we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy through our actions.
And that's so empowering because it means that we have the power to shape our own identities.
Yeah.
We're not defined by our past mistakes or your current limitations.
We can choose to become the people we want to be.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to that core Stoic principle of focusing on what we can control.
Right.
We can't always control the circumstances we find ourselves in.
Sure.
But we can always control our response.
And that's where true freedom lies.
It is.
In choosing how we react to whatever life throws our way.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into Stoicism,
I
want to leave you with a challenge.
Okay, I like it.
What's one area of your life where you could start applying these principles today?
What would the best you do differently?
Right. Maybe it's approaching a difficult conversation with more compassion. Maybe it's setting a boundary with a colleague who's been taking advantage of your time.
Sure.
Whatever it is, remember that you have the power to make that change.
Yeah.
And it might feel uncomfortable at first, but that's a sign that you're growing.
Yeah.
And even small changes can have a ripple effect over time.
Totally.
So be patient with yourself.
Okay.
Celebrate your successes and keep striving to become the best version of you.
I love that.
And if this deep dive has sparked your interest in Stoicism, I encourage you to explore further. There are tons of resources available from the ancient texts to modern interpretations, and who knows, maybe you'll even request another deep dive on the topic in the future.